Welcome to MSL Stories. Friends, if you don't mind, please subscribe to my channel. I have a dream of 1,000 subscribers. Thank you. Let's start the story. A white van sped past, splashing water across my sneakers as I stood outside our creaky gate with a heavy backpack. That instant hammered home a painful truth. I wouldn't be boarding any bus today. My father approached me in a calm voice that almost sounded rehearsed. He explained that the family had funds for only one public transport pass, and it was going to my older sister, June. She was apparently the star who deserved convenience more than anyone else. I stood there, 19 years old, with a knot in my stomach. My routine would now involve a 15-kilometer trek to Mapleview University in the morning, followed by the same distance back at dusk. Walking that route felt like dragging a sack of rocks. On the steeper roads, I would see the bus rumble by, carrying June in one of the cushioned seats. She was 21, heavily involved in extracurricular clubs, and carried herself like she was unstoppable. My mother kept insisting that June's contributions to the family's status were beyond measure, so whatever little funds remained after they purchased a new refrigerator would go to her transport. Each footstep I took felt like an echo of how they weighed our worth, and I clearly landed somewhere near the bottom. My days became an exercise in self-reliance. I left the house before daybreak, wore reflective strips so speeding motorists wouldn't run me over in the dark, and somehow arrived at class on time. Often I wondered if my parents actually believed that walking those long stretches would somehow build my resilience. Perhaps they convinced themselves it was character building. More likely, they simply didn't care if I slogged through dust and rain, as long as June's bus pass was fully covered. 7 years passed without a single word of apology from them. My mother, father, and sister were preoccupied with their own affairs. By that time, I had turned 26 and completed 2 degrees in mechanical engineering. While I was assembling prototypes and perfecting designs in a small industrial lab, June was still scraping by at graduate school, unsure of where her path might lead. My parents remained in the same old house, the fancy fridge still humming away in the corner of the kitchen. During that 7-year stretch, my life followed a modest but steady upward climb. An unexpected twist arrived in the form of an internship that transformed into a full-time position at Marlowe Tech Solutions. I found a humble apartment near my workplace and devoted every spare hour to mastering everything from product design to managerial tasks. My father would drop vague comments during holiday phone calls, praising June's brilliance while conveniently neglecting to ask how I was handling adulthood. Eventually, my parents and June knocked on my door, figuratively and literally, seeking assistance. Their expressions betrayed desperation. Apparently, June had wrecked her finances to keep pace with a lifestyle she couldn't afford. Vacations in exotic places, expensive night classes that never concluded, and a brand new car that bled money through monthly payments. My parents, both in their late 50s, had co-signed a few of her loans, so they found themselves in trouble. I was stable with a decent income, a small emergency fund, and no outstanding debts. They wanted me to sort out their financial chaos, perhaps out of convenience. That request emerged right around the same time I was wading through my own personal disaster. At 27, I had fallen in love with Morgan, who was 25 when we met. We married about a year later. Morgan brought a magnetic energy wherever she went. Confidence, quick wit, and a long list of professional achievements as a marketing consultant. We set up a life in a modern suburban neighborhood with 2 children, Adrian, now 4, and Annabelle, 2. On the surface, it seemed picture perfect. A stable home, parents making an effort to heal old wounds, and a new extended family dynamic that included lively gatherings around my backyard fire pit. I soon discovered that Morgan's glowing image was merely a performance. Subtle hints drifted into my radar. She'd step outside to take suspicious phone calls at odd hours. She'd lock her laptop as soon as I entered the room. Our monthly bills unexpectedly ballooned, but she had no explanation that held water. I had noticed she was forming a strangely close bond with a mutual acquaintance named Owen, who happened to be an up-and-coming real estate agent in our circle. He was 29, smooth-talking, and always eager to show off his success. I never had any desire to rummage through Morgan's private messages, but the inconsistencies became too blatant to ignore. She would mention meeting a colleague for an urgent project, but I found receipts for upscale restaurants on her credit card statements, locations that had nothing to do with her marketing clients. One evening, curiosity overpowered any sense of restraint, so I checked her car's dashboard camera. It was originally installed for safety, but it recorded audio as well. A single snippet was all I needed. I heard her giggling, calling Owen by a nickname I had never heard, discussing the best routes to a seaside cottage 2 hours away. That revelation felt like a freezing wind slicing through me. I didn't expect heartbreak to strike at a moment when I was juggling an entire family's finances, both mine and my parents. The next few days brought a series of silent decisions. I reached out to one of my old university friends, Jeremy, who worked in private security. He had resources to uncover the truth without turning the house into a circus. With his discreet assistance, I arranged a small tracking device on Morgan's keychain, a tactic I never envisioned using on someone I loved. Surveillance had become my new reality. I balanced daily tasks, cooking breakfast for Adrian and Annabelle, finalizing design projects for Marlowe Tech, and quietly updating a spreadsheet that tracked Morgan's whereabouts. Patterns formed rapidly. Morgan and Owen met at the same coffee shop every Wednesday before heading to a nearby boutique hotel. They also took day trips, always on the pretext of critical client meetings. My stomach twisted with each update, but a strange calm took over my mind. I documented everything, methodically preparing for a confrontation that I knew was inevitable. As if that chaos wasn't enough, my parents and June kept appearing at my doorstep, urging me to co-sign more papers or lend them money outright. They wanted me to consolidate their debts, pay off June's credit cards, or provide an immediate loan so she wouldn't default. I responded politely but kept stalling. Watching them beg was a peculiar experience. These were the same people who once believed I could walk endless kilometers to save them the cost of a single monthly bus pass. Now they were expecting me to open my wallet. 2 months of stealth passed, then came the day everything hit the boiling point. Morgan thought I was heading out of town for a business trip. Instead, I used that day to gather decisive proof. I waited in a rented vehicle near the boutique hotel, camera in hand, heart pounding. The sight of Morgan stepping out of the lobby, hand in hand with Owen, crystallized something in me. Some internal barrier finally broke. Later that evening, I assembled my parents, June, and Morgan around the living room of our house. My father had come expecting a financial solution for June's money problems. Morgan believed I was back from a routine business trip. Before anyone could shift into small talk, I displayed the surveillance footage on our television screen. Morgan's face tightened. My father and mother froze. June gawked, speechless. I had zero desire for melodrama, but clarity mattered. Morgan attempted an explanation, claiming it was a simple mistake, or a momentary lapse, or something that would never happen again. She tried to shift the blame. "We've been drifting apart," she said. Then she changed her angle, accusing me of prying into her life. The torrent of justifications and excuses did nothing to sway me. I had children to protect, a sense of dignity to uphold, and no patience left for illusions. I calmly informed Morgan that I intended to file for divorce. The statement broke the tense silence in the room. She stared at me with shock, as if I had no right to walk away. My father and mother tried to intervene, perhaps to smooth things over, as if this was a matter that could be patched up. I refused to accept any quick fixes. This wasn't a scenario that required group therapy or half-hearted forgiveness. I intended to leave this relationship behind and ensure that Morgan faced real consequences. In my next breath, I turned to my parents and June. They started to speak up, their voices choked with guilt and desperation, but I cut them off before they could finish. I explained that their repeated calls for financial bailouts would no longer be entertained. I had recently completed official paperwork that severed any liability I might have had for the loans they co-signed in my name, loans they signed without my consent or with my forged signature. The forging aspect was something I had uncovered months earlier, but kept quiet about while I assembled my own retaliation plan. The forging surfaced through an alert from the bank that questioned the authenticity of my signature. I promptly requested documentation, discovered the mismatch was glaring, and used that as leverage. I approached a legal firm specializing in fraud. The attorney guided me through the steps to absolve myself of any responsibility. In our living room that night, I announced the entire truth. I knew about the forged documents, and I had already taken the legal route to detach myself from the situation. My parents' jaws dropped. June looked as if she'd been caught staging a major con. Within a week, Morgan was served with divorce papers, which highlighted her betrayal and the substantial evidence I possessed. Owen's role was also scrutinized once I provided statements to Morgan's marketing clients. Some of her pending contracts dissolved overnight thanks to her questionable ethics. I made sure to keep every step within the confines of the law. I had no interest in stepping outside legal boundaries. The facts alone were enough to dismantle her professional life. Her meltdown began almost immediately. She called me, sent lengthy messages, and tried to reach out through mutual friends. The central theme of every communication was that she never intended to ruin our marriage. She insisted we could work past this if we just gave it time. I had no intention of revisiting the issue. We had children, and that remained my main concern. By the time we met in mediation, she wore a distressed expression. Our attorneys negotiated custody, ensuring Adrian and Annabelle's interests came first. The settlement allocated a fair arrangement for them, shared visitation times, but I gained primary custody, complete with child support. There was no inclination in me to salvage a romantic relationship. Our bond was purely administrative now. During that same time frame, my parents bombarded me with urgent demands. They pleaded for me to reconsider my withdrawal from their debts, insisting that this new financial cliff would devastate them. My father, at 58, had a small pension from a municipal job. My mother, 56, worked part-time at a local craft store. Their combined income was a fraction of what they owed. June was 28 by then, unemployed after dropping out of multiple programs. Her credibility had plummeted among local employers who spotted the red flags on her background checks. I told them that their chaos was no longer my project. There would be no hush money, no secret deals, nothing that tethered me to their reckless decisions. Since they had chosen to burden me with forging my signature, I felt justified in leaving them to untangle their own knots. Some might consider it harsh. I considered it fair, given the circumstances. The day my divorce was finalized, I pressed forward with a final layer of accountability for Morgan. Through my attorney, I distributed copies of my gathered evidence, spreadsheets of her covert expenses, timetables for her rendezvous with Owen, and email confirmations of hotel bookings. I sent these materials to every relevant party who had dealings with her. It was a direct message. If you plan to collaborate with Morgan, be aware of her track record. This step effectively ruined her professional standing. A month later, her name vanished from local business directories, replaced by hushed talk of betrayal and questionable alliances. In my own sphere, I found cautious relief. I was a freshly divorced father, turning 28, navigating single parenthood and a demanding engineering career. Adrian and Annabelle deserved a stable upbringing, and I poured my efforts into ensuring they felt safe and loved. My parents and sister, now facing the full weight of their financial troubles, withdrew from me entirely. They moved to a smaller house in a less expensive part of the county. I heard rumors that the bank repossessed June's fancy car, that my father's pension was garnished, and that their once pristine credit was in tatters. Meanwhile, I began forging new connections outside the old toxic circles. My colleague at Marlowe Tech, Fiona Peterson, offered support in the form of dinners and rides for my kids while I worked overtime. Our friendship turned into something that felt oddly like hope for the future. Fiona was 30, single mother of a 7-year-old boy, and understood the complexities of raising children under challenging circumstances. We sometimes spent entire evenings at her place, our children playing together, while we shared stories of heartbreak and small victories. During those talks, I never voiced regret about the path I took. Maybe there was sorrow over how events played out. Divorce is never a pleasant experience. But regret? No. Morgan made her choices, and my parents made theirs. Even June, for all her flamboyant arrogance, had to face the consequences of living beyond her means. My objective was never to dwell on justifications for revenge or to nurse bitterness. The plan was laid out, executed, and concluded. Each player in this drama stood on the stage of their own accountability. A few months down the line, word reached me that Morgan was entangled in a legal battle with Owen over assets they had purchased together. The short-lived romance that wrecked our household collapsed under the stress of financial disputes and the shame of public exposure. She attempted a last-ditch apology through a handwritten note, delivered via our attorneys. The message insisted she had learned from her mistakes and that she wanted to find closure. I felt nothing but an odd detachment. The letter went into a drawer, unread after the first few sentences. Friends occasionally asked if I felt that sweet rush of triumph. Perhaps there was a flicker of satisfaction in exposing hypocrisy. But more than anything, I experienced a renewed sense of peace. My life no longer hinged on illusions or family obligations that demanded endless sacrifice. The children adapted well enough to the new reality, thanks in part to therapy sessions that helped them process their parents' divorce in a healthy way. Adrian grew especially fond of drawing robots and futuristic vehicles. Maybe a reflection of my career in mechanical engineering. Annabelle liked to play teacher with her plush toys, always making up elaborate stories about them cooperating on projects. As for my parents, the phone calls became rare. When they did reach out, it felt more like desperation than genuine affection. I always responded politely, never shouting or voicing contempt, but I offered no support beyond basic courtesy. The echoes of the day they decided my sister's comfort was more important than mine never left me. They had set the stage for my sense of worth, and their forging of my signature only confirmed how little they respected my boundaries. I gave them no further ammunition or resources. People sometimes assume that a thirst for vengeance means constantly circling back to rehash the pain. In my experience, closure comes from watching those who harmed you tumble under the weight of their own decisions. My family's pleas for assistance, Morgan's professional downfall, and Owen's rapid exit from the picture served as the concluding chapter in a saga that started with me trudging to class on foot. There was no necessity to keep explaining my stance or offering disclaimers for my actions. A new phase is unfolding in my life, one where the horizon feels open again. The children keep me rooted, and my work at Marlowe Tech has expanded into project leadership, a role that I approach with sharpened focus. The folks who once doubted my determination saw it on full display, from the day I walked those grueling kilometers to the final day in court. The memory of standing out in the rain, bus after bus pulling away without me, remains a reminder of how far I've come. I'm 28 now, newly single in a practical sense, father of two, and forging a path free of manipulations. Some nights, I sit by my small garden in the backyard, sipping tea while I watch my kids chase each other with toy planes. Calm nights like these contrast sharply with the chaos that once defined my home. My parents, sister, and ex-wife inhabit a different orbit, shaped by the very actions they chose. Calls from attorneys have tapered off, and the legal ties are more or less resolved. My parents still attempt to coax me into giving them second chances. June sometimes sends me messages about her regrets. I treat them all with civility, but keep a safe distance. My children thrive when I'm not juggling other people's problems. That is the real win. If they ask about their extended family, I answer in a way that doesn't sow hate in their hearts. They can form their own judgments when they grow older and understand the complexities. I won't warp their impressions with bitterness, even though I hold no illusions about those who hurt me. Morgan has tried re-entering the children's lives in bigger ways, but court orders define the boundaries. If she wants to be a consistent presence, she'll have to follow the parenting schedule. The days of her breezing in and out, claiming urgent meetings, are over. Some part of me wonders if she grasps how thoroughly her decisions dismantled what we had. It doesn't matter. She's traveling her own path now. On rare occasions, I glance at old photographs. There we are, Morgan and I, all smiles at our engagement party. My parents stand behind us, arms around June. It looks like a painting of a happy family. If I were a stranger viewing those photos, I might assume everything worked out marvelously. Reality, of course, offers a different perspective. Revenge, in my view, happened on multiple fronts. I cut off my parents' chance to exploit me for their debts. I dismantled Morgan's facade by ensuring her behavior reached everyone involved in her professional life. And I uncovered the forgery that June tried to hide behind smoke and mirrors. Nobody escaped unscathed. Everyone faces the direct ramifications of their own actions. That's enough closure for me. Yes, I carry emotional scars from betrayal, but I also hold the strength of someone who stood up for what they deserved. The chapter that began with a stolen bus pass is over. A new story is unfolding, one where I no longer seek acceptance from those who failed to treat me with basic respect. My life is my own. Thank you, friends.